The October Revolution was a revolution in Russia that happened in November 1917. It is called the October Revolution because, for the Russians on their calendar, it occurred in November. In Russia, they followed a calendar that was 13 days behind the United States and Europe until 1918. The October Revolution was the second and last step towards a Marxist government in Russia. One of the main things influencing the revolution was World War I. When Russia joined World War I on the Allied side, they had a large army but were not prepared for the war. Russia joined World War I on the side of Great Britain and France. Russian leaders were not fit for the job, and their factories were not able to produce enough supplies for those soldiers. This led to most of the Russian army being killed early on in the war. Because of the conditions of the war, the Caesar of Russia, Nicholas II, decided to take full authority of the army. The Caesar was an absolute monarch in Russia, and the role was given by family. A connection to this was a monarch in England because both were absolute monarchies and both were given by family and blood. When Nicholas II was at war, he gave the power of the country to his wife, who relied on an ill advisor. This advisor led to the conditions of Russia to be worse, and soon there was a struggle for food and supplies in Russia. On March 8th, the peasants of Russia began to protest their lack of food, and this began the February Revolution. The February Revolution resulted in the Caesar of Russia stepping down from his role, and this ended the Russian monarchy. The power of Russia was given to a provisional government led by a man named Alexander Kerensky. Provisional government means temporary government. After this government was formed, some peasants became unhappy with this new government. They thought that this new government was not helping the peasants get food and the supplies they needed. Also, the provisional government continued Russia's involvement in World War I, which many protested against. The opposition to this government were led by the Bolsheviks. They were led by a man named Vladimir Lenin. Lenin had been in exile until April 1917 because of his revolutionary ideas. The Germans helped Lenin escape and gave him money to start a revolution in Russia. The Germans did this because they thought that a Russian revolution would weaken the Russian war effort. The Bolsheviks wanted to start a Marxist revolution. The Marxist ideas were the ideas of social equality and that no one was allowed to have private property. In 1917, the provisional government sent out an effort to attack the Central Powers, and when they failed, a revolution began in the Russian army. An example of this rebellion was a writing from a Russian officer who said, "I have received word that in some units the officers are being slaughtered by their own men." This is when the Russian army collapsed, and Lenin took advantage of this situation. He began a revolution in Russia known as the October Revolution. The October Revolution in 1917 involved the Red Guard, which were the factory workers of Russia. The Red Guard attacked the provisional government. They attacked government buildings and other locations. The October Revolution was very quick and short because the provisional government fell very quickly to the Bolsheviks. The Bolsheviks put Lenin as the leader of Russia. He quickly made Russia communist. One of his first acts of communist government was making the ownership of private land illegal, and he gave all of the land to the peasants. He also gave the Russian factories to the factory workers. This gave Russian workers and peasants more power in their lives than they had ever had before. There were many immediate and long-term effects to the October Revolution. When Lenin gained power, he set out to make peace with Germany, and in the treaty he did, in the expense of many parts of the Russian Empire. Another effect was a 3-year civil war in Russia. This war was the Red Guard fighting the White Army. The White Army was made up of people who opposed the Bolsheviks. The White Army received help from countries who opposed Lenin, like the US and France, but in the end, the Bolsheviks won the war in 1920. This civil war led to famines in Russia. A connection to the civil war in Russia is the Civil War in the United States. Both divided the country, and both resulted in many struggles like famine. Both were fighting over aspects of government and society. So, what was the significance of the October Revolution, and what was its impact? First, the October Revolution gave the power of Russia to Lenin and made Russia a communist country. Russia being communist affected the Cold War because in the Cold War, the USSR was trying to prove that a communist country was better over the United States democracy. The October Revolution also impacted life in Russia because many of the poor peasants and workers were able to gain control of their lives. The revolution also resulted in the Civil War, which caused famine and death. One of the main effects of the October Revolution was backing out of World War I. This caused a major impact to the Allies because without Russia, they lost many soldiers and supplies. Many people ask, how would the war have changed if Russia did not exit the war? How would the war have ended? Would World War I have lasted as long with the power of Russia with the Allies?